Who on the Minnesota Vikings defense is ready to break out? That and the rest of your questions on Twitter Tuesday on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day each and every day. I appreciate you all so very much. Thank you so much for hanging out this weekend as well. It's been a tough one for the Vikings and Vikings fans. So thank you so much for hanging out. If you're new here, hello and welcome. You can find the show wherever you find your favorite podcast. Just search out Locked On Vikings on any podcast listening app, including YouTube or even Amazon Fire and Roku if you download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There is something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Answering your questions today on Twitter Tuesday. That is where you ask stuff and I answer it, no matter how weird it gets. And it is going to get a little timey-wimey later in the show. Get excited for that, but we'll start with some of the easier ones. If you have any questions, you can always submit them to the Google form, which will be linked in the show notes of any podcast, or just send an email to lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com. First one I'm going to answer comes from Scene Season, who asks, who is a player that would elevate the defense most by breaking out? You can put an offensive player too, but I have a feeling you would just say Ed Ingram. Yeah. Ty Chandler, I think, actually, maybe. Because Ed Ingram, he just needs to be solid. He doesn't need to become a breakout, really, really cool guard or anything like that. And I think the rest of the O-line is, solid enough. Where I feel like if you got, a true breakout stud, young running back, or, I don't know, somebody like Brandon Powell or somebody, really weird coming out, that, Nick Muse or somebody like that could, become an extra pass-catching weapon. But otherwise, that offense does feel pretty set. There's not a lot of room for, somebody to come in and, take a bunch of a job. Everybody's kind of got their job there. I guess J.J. McCarthy's the easiest answer there. Maybe I should say him. But, okay, defensively, breakout candidates. So, the players that would have the most impact, maybe Booth. If you could just get just a dang good cornerback. I'm sure Scene Season wants me to say Lewis Scene, which would be pretty unlikely. And also they already have Bynum and Metellus, the safety room going from what we have at safety to breakout star. The distance there is less than going from what we have at corner right now to breakout star. So if you could get something from Booth at that corner room, that would be pretty cool. But in terms of people who could be this year's breakout player, I think Ivan Pace could be that guy. A lot of times the breakout players of the year are the players that were good before, but the national media didn't notice. And it's 100% that is Ivan Pace. It could also be a rookie like Dallas Turner, although maybe both for him and J.J. McCarthy, it's kind of stupid to say a rookie. It kind of feels like cheating. Of course they're breaking out. They haven't played in the NFL yet. A first-round rookie feels a little bit weird. It could be Josh Metellus, I would argue, broke out last year. He got quite a bit of that attention. So I don't know if I'm allowed to say him, but yeah, I think Andrew Booth would be the guy that would have the most impact if he broke out. But I think the guy most likely to be labeled the Vikings breakout player of the year would be Ivan Pace, and it'll feel a little funky because we were all so excited about him last year. What do you mean breaking out? But remember, this is for the world to notice, and I don't think the world noticed him because he was on a Vikings team that nobody really wanted to watch anymore because of their quarterback stuff, and unfortunately, that does have an impact on things. An interesting one came in from the email from Matthew Eden, who did a whole big long thing about kickers, and I have not gotten to look through it yet, but he did ask a question. Do kickers purposely change anything on long kicks? So, you may increase your run up a little bit to kind of almost Happy Gilmore your way into more power. But you can actually see if you watch the 66-yard game winner that Justin Tucker made a couple years ago, just Google that, you'll find it. It was against the Lions. You'll actually see him do a little bit of a shuffle up into it to just get a little bit extra momentum. But otherwise, you just kind of hope you hit it long and true. Because you can do a kick that would be good from 50 from 25 and it'll still be good. So ideally, you're just doing that same motion every single time, and you have that that distance available. And if you just don't end up needing it, then that's fine. But you don't want to like start swinging at it or start trying to hit it hard, because like you want your normal kicking cadence to be a thing that makes it from 55 or whatever the top of your range is. But if you want to do that extra little shuffle, I guess you can if you are specifically Justin Tucker. And I look forward to, there's a lot of graphs here. I look forward to looking at this. Next one comes from Yeti, who asks, what is the most that undrafted free agents will be able to contribute this season, in your opinion? And who is on Ivan Pace watch, if anyone from this undrafted class? Nobody's on Ivan Pace watch. I think the Ivan Pace thing is like, to be an Ivan Pace level prospect, like Gabe Murphy does fit that bill in that everybody thought he should have been drafted probably high day 3, and he didn't get drafted. And it kind of feels dumb that he didn't get drafted. And that was true of Ivan Pace, but Ivan Pace also showed up and like absolutely exploded in training camp, was unbelievable in special teams, and ended up being the best linebacker on the team. Like, that is an exceedingly rare situation. I would not expect that. There's not this year's Ivan Pace. That is a very special thing. But Murphy and McGlothern, yeah, those are the two guys. I'm actually pretty stoked on Dwight McGlothern. I just liked his tape. I just think I liked the way that he played on tape. I know that there's like other context and stuff. There's a reason that he went undrafted and all that, and he kind of had to like transfer around to get playing time and all that. But I don't know. I liked what he put together. I think the intrigue with undrafted guys more often is looking at who has a path to make the team. And that's where you look at somebody like Dallas Gant, who is an off-ball linebacker, and if he can be good enough at special teams, he can maybe knock off someone like Brian Asamoah. Like, maybe that happens. But I don't know if I see anybody with, like, Ivan Pace's path to the roster was, like, wide open. He had to beat out, like, Troy Reader, who never played with the twos all of camp and then got cut. Like, that's all you had to do. So I think that was a special circumstance. I wouldn't try to find, like, the sequel to it. Josh asks, does the league do anything as far as compensation goes for rookies that pass away? Or is it just simple, you have an open spot, you can fill it with whoever, no draft pick or anything? So no, the Vikings don't get any compensation for Kyrie Jackson or anything like that, if that's what you're asking. There's a similar question that was floated around a bunch in the comments of the Kyrie Jackson thing that I did on Saturday, which you should go look at if you're looking for information about that situation. But there were some people asking about like what the league should do something for his family and stuff like that. So in the CBA, there's a process for this. They do have a life insurance thing. So there's I think if you have no accrued years, you get $1 million life insurance policy. So there's that. And also all the money in his contract, which he had signed his contract, not all the rookies have, but he had, it is essentially goes to his quote unquote, his estate. So whoever he wrote down as the beneficiary of all of that money, anything, it basically functionally it works like a release. And then there's like health insurance for a little while for any dependents, but I don't think he had any kids or anything. So there's that. But all the guaranteed money, which is most of a rookie deal, and the $1 million in life insurance will go to whoever he wrote down on the form. Peter Larson asks, what are the biggest areas of improvement needed in Sam Darnold's game to be considered a respectable starter? And how fixable do you think those issues are? Fixable? Probably not, or else they would have been fixed by now. But the biggest issue is Bozo Gene stuff. Forcing things, there's, I think, a vision issue that causes interceptions. There's just that's what really made him not work out with the Jets, was too many instances of lurking linebacker didn't see him, threw it right to him. Or thinking you can kind of wing one in under a lurking corner who actually jumps the route and it's a pick six, which I think happened on his very first pass ever. But that kind of stuff kept cropping up. Is it fixable? I mean, theoretically, sure. But you got to wonder what the odds are. I mean, we're in year 5, right? And he's still not like a starting quality QB. The 49ers elected to go with free agency and sign Josh Dobbs over keeping him as the backup. for another year. So that's kind of the level that we're looking at here. And I don't think, I don't see like a lot of, yeah, maybe you've got the Geno type arc, but the Geno thing, I mean, that took him like 5 years to go from the guy he was with the Jets in 2013 to the guy he is with the Seahawks now. Like that is a long thing. And it wasn't just connecting with the right coach for the first time. Like it was a long process of being a backup for a while and totally changing the way that he approaches the game. Got a few more questions here. Fewer questions, so we're going to go more in depth maybe on some of them, but whatever it is, we will get to it on Locked On Vikings. Today's Locked On Vikings episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook, and that is because they have all kinds of really cool stuff going on all the time over at FanDuel.com. They have a new boost or bonus every single day on FanDuel. So go check back daily and see if there's something that catches your eye. You can go gamble on WNBA, go take Angel Reese rebound overs. I think Caitlin Clark unders have been really hot, if I recall. So you could go do that. You could go do MLB bets if you want to actually have a reason to enjoy baseball. Or you can, of course, go to like NFL futures. You can go bet on the Vikings, who are currently dead last in NFC North odds. If you think that that's inappropriate, you can go gamble on it and even bet on like you can say, no, I just think they'll be third, and you can gamble on the specific one. Whatever it is, go to FanDuel.com and make the most out of summer. FanDuel, make every moment more. Thanks a bunch for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day each and every day. When you're done here, go check out the Minnesota Football Party on Locked On Minnesota Sports, as well as their 24/7 live streaming channel. 24/7 Minnesota sports content coming at you all the time. The next question here on Locked On Vikings comes from Jack Callahan, who says, I have seen light, almost definitely unrealistic and unlikely steam on Vikings Twitter that Adam Thelen could come back and be wide receiver 3. Do you think that would be a good move if it somehow actually happened? I guess the answer of if it would be a good idea is always going to be about money. How much would he make? But he's under contract with the Panthers for like 2 more years. And the reason that he chose the Panthers deal over what the Vikings had offered him, because when he hit free agency, the Vikings had given him what was essentially a 1-year kind of truncated deal at a lower, it was basically a prove it deal that said, let's do, this pay cut and void out all the rest of your years. And then you'll hit free agency the next offseason. And he said, no, I would rather you cut me. I would rather hit free agency now while I'm 1 year younger. And it kind of worked out for him because the Panthers gave him a 3-year deal, which the Vikings weren't willing to do. So I don't think anything about that has changed. The Vikings were only willing to have him under contract through last year, which is now over. So I can't imagine there would be any interest there. But also, he's making $9.9 million with the Panthers this year, and releasing him would be insane. They would take like $8 million of that dead. So I don't really understand what people are talking about there. I think you need to curate who you follow, buddy. That one does not pass the smell test at all. Nolan M asks, what are some things about KOC's offensive scheme that sets him apart from Shanahan or McVay? We've seen many iterations of a Shanahan scheme throughout the league to this point. What is the iteration for O'Connell? That is an interesting question. So when I say the Shanahan-McVay scheme, that's just the name for it, right? It's like when you call the Tampa 2, it isn't just the Bucks. It wasn't just the Bucks. It just that's what it was named after, or like calling it the Fangio defense. Well, it's like a certain scheme that a lot of teams use, including Fangio, and you just named it after him because he's the pioneer of it or whatever. So when I say Shanahan-McVay, I'm talking about the Rams and 49ers, but we got the Dolphins. We have the Packers. I believe the Bears are now on this train. Of course, you have the Vikings. I think maybe like a third of the teams in the league use this structure. In terms of the differences team to team, the answer is going to be the same no matter what team you ask about, which is it's just going to be in how they deploy that. Kevin O'Connell is more pass happy than either McVay or Shanahan. He wants to air it out more. And maybe that was just because he believed a lot in Kirk Cousins. Maybe that'll change now that he's got a rookie quarterback and you're going to approach that differently. We'll see. But it didn't change with Dobbs or Jaron Hall or anything like that. It was just like a lot of play action. But he doesn't really believe in establishing the run to set up play action. I think he does literally just as much as you need to like set up the fake, but he doesn't feel the need to commit to it in the way the Kubiaks did. Gary Kubiak very much felt that way and saw eye to eye with Zimmer on that, which is why they worked together well for a while. And I think Clint Kubiak kind of just took after his dad as well. So like they believe, and that goes back to his time in Houston and Denver and all that. Like that was very much Gary Kubiak believed in it. We got to run a lot of outside zone. We got to get those guys instinctually playing laterally so that we can boot against it. And Kevin O'Connell doesn't really believe in that. He believes, hey, look, if you show them, good run action, they're just going to take it. Which is, I think, a little bit more modern of a viewpoint on that. It's also just, between O'Connell or LaFleur or Shane Waldron or any of these guys. That's another one, by the way. Yes, Seahawks, right? Between all of these guys, Zach Taylor, Bengals, you will see Kevin Stefanski, right? Browns. You could go on. But between all these guys, you'll see that they will sequence things a little differently as well. How they decide, like what concepts they decide to deploy and what they're trying to set up will be kind of a different thing too. And that honestly, at that point, you're also talking about, well, what rosters do they have? Kevin O'Connell doesn't call the same plays if he's head coach of the Packers as he does as head coach of the Vikings, or at least he shouldn't, right? Because you've got a different group of people there with different skill sets and different talents and good at different things and bad at different things. So I guess I don't know if there's like a defining, this is the Kevin O'Connell thing. I think being a little more pass happy has been very much a defining thing of his tenure so far. We've only seen 2 years of it, so we don't have a ton of sample to be able to say this is like his deal. But like in terms of the staple concepts that they like from flag and bow and the movement stuff that they like, is like a lot of them use the same staples, right? All these teams are running a lot of wide choice, just tight end choice. TJ Hawkinson, that's a big third and long one for the Vikings, or third and anything. They use that a lot, and they also use it on 1st and 10. It's just a good way to get 6 or 7 yards if you need it, and you can even go for a bigger play if you're on 3rd and 12, which TJ Hawkinson converted like 2 or 3 of those last year, which is pretty insane. So like a lot of choice, a lot of wide zone. Maybe there's a difference between wide zone users and mid zone users, although there's not a lot of true wide zone users in the NFL anymore. The difference is that you're not having the play side tackle reach. He's kicking out instead. He's basically taking inside shoulder of that defensive end and working outward rather than trying to get outside shoulder to that guy, trying to like get out and around these quick defensive ends. That's pretty much universal now, though. I think most people are running mids. If you're running wide zone still, I think you're a bit of a dinosaur. So the mid zone thing, but that was a big difference between, the Clint Kubiak was running the dinosaur. I'm super curious to see what happens now in New Orleans with him as a play caller, because I wonder what he has learned and what's going to be different from what he called in 2021, which was very basic. I guess I don't know if there's a satisfying answer to your question. I would say like Kyle Shanahan himself uses a lot more double skill player blocks, like skill player double teams. That's the Zorro thing, right? A lot of tight end with a fullback or double tight end. Whereas the McVay side for a long time was predicated on 11 personnel and airing it out a little bit more, but using those wide receivers as blockers and really, really valuing those wide receivers as blockers. O'Connell comes from the McVay side, but has been more and more influenced by the Shanahan side, and he's falling somewhere in the middle there. But ultimately, it also has to do with the fact that he inherited a team that had CJ Ham on it. That's going to be different than a team whose primary, blocking skill player was Ben Skowronek. You're going to want to maybe go a little bit more to the 21 personnel side of things. And now you got Josh Oliver, and eventually you'll have TJ Hawkinson as well. So you're going to do that differently because your wide receiver 3 is Brandon Powell and your tight end 2 is Josh Oliver. You might want Oliver on the field a little bit more. You might trust him a little bit more, although O'Connell does love Brandon Powell a lot. So yeah, we'll see. But long-winded answer to kind of say nothing really. There's not like a defining thing, except maybe pass happiness. Jack asks, in your playbook series, you mentioned how QBs would can a play when it switches to a backup one. Would a QB ever want to change his mind and go back to the original one? How would that be called? Yes. So you'll say can, or kill is another common word for it. Essentially, you'll call a play, blah, 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 can to, blah, blah, blah. And the first play is the play that's called, but if you hear can, run the second play instead. Gives you a nice dynamic. I talked about that in the thing last week. By the way, if you watched on YouTube, very sorry about the screenshots that just like didn't work. That were just like media offline. Couldn't tell you what happened there. They looked fine in the timeline, and then by the time I uploaded it on YouTube, I didn't check like the export themselves. They were up. My bad. So sorry about that. But anyways, you can still go listen to it. I mean, it's still a podcast, right? So you can still go check out the playbook series if you want to know just how a playbook is constructed, and really, really deep stuff. In part of that, though, yes, the answer is reload. So you would say it would all happen during the snap count. So you say, white 80, can. Maybe do a motion, and then they respond to a motion in a certain way, and you go, oh, that can was wrong. Reload, set up. And then you would snap. And usually that'll happen on a quick snap count, because by that time you probably use so much of the play clock that you don't exactly have time to do like any hard counting or anything else special. Couple more questions here to get to, including a weird one. Welcome to Twitter Tuesdays on Locked On Vikings. Moving on here on Twitter Tuesday on the Locked On Vikings podcast. The next question comes from MN Sports Appreciator, who asks, if you could take one trait from one Vikings player and put that trait on another player, what would it be, and who would you steal it from and put it onto? Okay, I love this because I'm ruining someone. So who am I okay with ruining? I'm going to take somebody's best trait and ruin that person and make them no longer important, but I'm going to put that on. So who has like a nice, like one flaw that is the thing preventing them from really taking it out? I want to find someone's patience and put it onto Andrew Booth. That's what I want. Somebody's like calm, mature patience and put it onto Andrew Booth. And then he'll be a really good corner. Like that turns him into an awesome corner. If you could just get that problem out, he becomes a really, really sweet corner. So whose patience am I taking away trying to do that? I'm going to take the patience away from a Caleb Evans, who honestly sometimes plays it too patiently. And I mean, what happened in December, I think had nothing to do with this. I don't think it was that nuanced. I think he just got in his head. But a Caleb Evans coming out was very patient corner. And I think that you'd rather be too patient than not patient enough. Hence a Caleb Evans starting over Andrew Booth for the last couple of years. But if you took that away and added and gave that to Booth, I think you would have a really, really cool corner. I want to like think of other ones. Like, can I do something stupid and give like a lineman's size to like Justin Jefferson just to make him like that much weirder? Or would that like also slow him down or something? That probably would also slow him down. I don't want to give him that. I'll do another one. I'll give the conservative check down ability of Jaren Hall, that kind of the willingness to not force the play, and I'm going to give that to Nick Mullins. Put a little an extra in his belt, and give him that tool so that he doesn't constantly throw 4 interceptions a game. Eric the Red asks, what was your worst ever football take? Ooh, I've been wrong about a lot of things. I mean, there's some stuff I've just been like straight up wrong about. Like for a while, I thought that like that analytics people was just a front office thing and that they wouldn't have like much of a game day role. That's super wrong. But that's not like a bad take. I just had the wrong information and then updated it. So I'm trying to think of there are draft takes that I had that weren't like, I didn't think Brian O'Neill was a very good pick. That didn't work out. That was a pretty good one, maybe. My answer to this for a long time has been the first ever Locked On Vikings episode I did. And I said, hello, my name is Luke. I'll be your host from now on. And this was 2018. It was December 2018. So we were just at the tail end of the 2018 season. And I caped for not firing John DeFilippo the day before John DeFilippo got fired. And in hindsight, like that was very wrong. Most of it was similar to the way we talked about Donatel a couple years ago. It was like, look, it's his first year. Maybe you could let him get things under his belt. Not arguing that these things weren't actually wrong, but in saying, hey, maybe give a guy a chance to grow a little bit. But obviously, that isn't what John DeFilippo need. He's like in the UFL now. I think he was the New Orleans Breakers in the USFL last year, but I forget if he was involved I think he was involved somewhere this year. But like that's where he's been now. So obviously I was super wrong about that. So that's the one I always go with. I'm sure I've had something worse that there are a lot of people out there that, I mean, I don't know. There are people in the YouTube comments, I'm sure have something they're mad at me about. Finally, this question comes from Waleed, who asks, if you had a time machine and could go back to any moment in Vikings history and attempt to change the outcome, what would it be? And more importantly, how would you attempt to change it? It's got to be something you could personally affect, which is, okay, so yeah, no, I can't just say make Gary Anderson make the kick. Like, I have to personally be able to do it. So if I had a time machine, I thought about this one a lot, Waleed. I tanked this one out before recording. So if I can't just go back and be like, someone who got hurt doesn't get hurt, right? Give Tommy Kramer a healthy 1987 season or something like that. Like, that would be a really, really great one. I feel like I could go back in time and give someone prior information, right? I could tell the team not to draft Demetrius Underwood, but since it's just me, like, I can't just waltz into to Winter Park in 1999 and be like, hey, don't draft Demetrius Underwood. Don't do the Herschel Walker trade. Like, they're not going to, there's security at these buildings. So I have to go, I think, further back to the point where you could just kind of like stumble upon someone and like tell them something where it wasn't as big of an operation as it is nowadays. So here's my answer. I'm going to go back to 1969. Joe Cap, Bud Grant. I feel like I could find my way into access. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I feel like that, like the Vikings facility was something you could just kind of show up and maybe like enjoy a training camp practice or something like that. And I want to be able to talk to someone, anyone, right? Someone who can relay the message. I don't need to get FaceTime with Bud Grant or anything like that. But I want to do this around wintertime in the playoffs after they beat the Browns, or just before the Super Bowl, right? And I want to tell them, hey, you're going to need to win the championship. You're going to need to beat an odd front. You need to know how to beat an odd front. So back then, the NFL was all even front defenses. You ran a 4-3. You had 2 tackles, you had 2 ends, you would rush gaps. The AFL had evolved in a sort of weird microcosm of itself where everything was a little funky. There was a lot more trick plays. There were a lot more. It was very concerned with being an entertaining product because it was still a fledgling league trying to attract attention. So all the owners and all of the like principal actors were really okay with it being a little showboaty and a little bit more about being fun than the NFL, which was kind of stuffy football. It was hard nosed, it was grindy, it was bruisey, and they had this 50-year at this point tradition that was, I think, worth preserving for them. But for this new league, it's like, well, we gotta kind of set ourselves apart from that. So we're gonna do weird reverses and stuff. And I think that environment forced everybody to think outside the box a little bit more. And so you had a lot more odd fronts, which were just not popular in the 60s in the NFL. So you had a big, giant nose tackle in the middle. And when your center was Mick Tingelhoff, Hall of Famer, phenomenal player, undersized, famously, and he's going up against a big, giant nose tackle, that caused a ton of problems in those Super Bowls. So what I would try to do is to explain that problem to Bud Grant or somebody and show what modern NFL teams do, because everybody's got a small center nowadays. And show what modern NFL teams do in terms of like double teams and stuff. Like back in the day, and you can actually hear them all talk about this on like the Missing Rings Americas game that was made about this season. They like the center basically never pass blocked. They would do the snap and everyone else would rush somewhere else. And the center wasn't ever really a part of it because the center would always just be like helping and chipping a guard. Nobody really wanted to be a part of that. It just kind of wasn't how the metagame of the NFL worked until you got to the AFL where it was that way. And then you got all these problems. So I would want to give them the solution to that issue, which would both hopefully help Joe Cap stay a little cleaner in the backfield. He got beat up so bad in that game. He literally he could not physically finish that game. Gary Cuozzo had to. And he, like, not only would you get the whole game out of him, but hopefully you get a better performance. And also it would just put the Vikings in the mindset of, hey, this is going to be a different challenge and we have to kind of approach it a different way. We can't just waltz into this game and steamroll them like we did all the other NFL teams, which they really did kind of walk in thinking, hey, we're 2 touchdown favorites. We're just going to be able to do things the same way we always did them and win. That wasn't true. This is a different kind of team with a different kind of challenge, and we have to face that differently. That's what I would try to tell someone. If I gotta manage to get a line on somebody back in 1969, which, like, if you knew which bar to go to, you could find Carl Kasolke. Like, you could do that. So I would do that and maybe try to save the Vikings a Super Bowl in 1969. We'll be back to the Everyman series tomorrow. Maybe we'll do the kickers since I didn't get time for that yesterday. I'll talk to you all then. And as always, Skull.